Some people have been asking me to talk about this film for a while now, and this movie's really difficult for me to talk about because I've seen the movie in so many different ways and analyzed it and written papers on it. I've done all kinds of things with it, and it continues to just be an iconic movie that's sadly being forgotten, so I think now's the time to finally talk about it, and that's The Crow. It came out in 1994, starring the late, great Brandon Lee, and it's such a beautiful, beautiful movie in so many different ways. Firstly, unfortunately, what comes to mind when anybody thinks of this movie is the tragedy around Brandon Lee's death, and it is very sad, and I myself have to constantly go back and read how it happened because it's such a weird, interesting disaster. Basically what happened was Brandon Lee was accidentally shot by a prop gun that was accidentally loaded, not purposefully put a real bullet in there, but gunpowder was put in place of a blank cartridge, and a piece of bullet shell was lodged in one of the guns, and the combination of the gunpowder and the lodged bullet shell that nobody noticed actually simulated a real bullet and pierced Brandon Lee's rib, and he died hours later. And it's very, very sad, very tragic. But honestly, that's a big reason what makes this film so magical to watch. It's probably the biggest case of artistic irony I have ever seen, and probably any of us will ever see in a film, where a rising star's last movie is playing a character who comes back from the dead. And for 2 hours, he's back from the dead, wreaking vengeance on those who hurt him and his loved ones. So it's kind of weird watching Brandon Lee portray this character as his last film. And he's making all these weird jokes and making the audience question about death and morality and things like that when we know what really happened. So it adds a completely new layer on top of the film. And honestly, if he had survived that, the film wouldn't have had that deep philosophical layer. I mean, the question still would have been there about life and death and morality, things like that. But the fact that this was Brandon Lee's last film really adds a lot of speculation, a lot of questions that make this film all the more fun to watch, for better or for worse. And that is one thing that many people love about the movie. And I myself continue to be inspired by it, and that tragedy plays a big part in the movie's success. But aside from that, because people always talk about that, aside from that, there's so many other great reasons why the film stands on its own. And a big part of that I constantly love and go back to is the set design and the lighting. The look of the film is gothic. It's just grand. And one of the taglines for the posters back in the day was "darker than the bat." And they couldn't have said it much better than that, because it really is. They took the gothic Tim Burton style from the 1989 Batman film, and the filmmakers said, you know what, you don't know what gothic is. We're going to make this as edgy and gritty as we possibly can, and we're going to make the Gotham City look like the Emerald City. And they did just that. The look of the film is as gritty as it gets. I think it's been unmatched. I don't think any other film has really matched it as far as edginess and gothic overtones. The only film that really comes to mind is Sin City, but that was very, very stylized. And this also was pretty stylized too, but it also kept a foot in, reality, and wanted to keep it gritty and real looking. Like, this is a really sick part of a city that you can actually find real easily. Like, this is the underbelly of a city, the type of part of town that you would never ever want to get lost in. It's really, really interesting, really dark. The supporting cast is absolutely fantastic. From the guys who play T-Bird, Tintin, Fun Boy, they're just sick, twisted. They act wonderful. They really sell the idea that these are sick monsters. I mean, that they have a sick sense of humor, no sense of morality, and you don't feel bad at all when they die. No matter how righteous you may be, no matter how moral you may be, if you're how religious you might be, it really doesn't matter, because when you, as an audience member, you see these characters meet their ends and you feel better. You realize that people like this do exist, and if people actually met ends like that, it kind of makes it okay. I mean, there's this universal feeling that all people have over vengeance and an animalistic form of justice that people don't really like to acknowledge, and they try to find a more humane way to deal with things like that. And this film puts that kind of taboo subject in your face, and it doesn't make the idea bad. It isn't trying to, I don't think the film has an agenda to try to say, what is justice and what is right and what is wrong, but it definitely takes these weird, dark subjects that people don't really like to talk about and forces people to come to grips with it and kind of form their own opinions about it, whether they had them before or not. So any movie that can really do that and make people question how they view things or their morality on certain subjects, the movie's done its job, first of all. But whether or not the movie intended to do that, the fact that it does that shows that this is a really powerful film. Also, I have to say that the villain of the film, the main villain of the film, Top Dollar, played by Michael Wincott, I freaking love this guy. He's probably one of my all-time favorite on-screen villains. A big reason why I love this guy is mainly because of his voice. Voice, I think, is a big, big selling point to a lot of great character actors. Michael Wincott just has an iconic villain voice that's low, graspy, grungy, and it's very, very, very easy to buy into the fact that this is one evil, evil man. On top of that, his mannerisms, his quiet charisma, when you don't know when he's going to snap, and when he does snap, it's pretty sick and vicious. Just all of these things that combine together to make this really, really vile character that in one way you can't wait to see him die, but in the other way you kind of don't want him to go, because then the fun's over. And I think that is the true test of a great villain, is one who you don't want to see go, because you're having fun hating this character. And Michael Wincott is definitely one of those actors that you just want to see stay in the film, because he's so good at what he does. Another thing I loved about the movie is the score. The score is absolutely gorgeous. I actually bought the score on CD shortly after I saw the movie, and I've listened to every track at least twice. The score is also unique, just like the movie itself. It has certain tracks that sound dark and voodoo, for lack of a better term, that have interesting percussions and wailing that sounds like it's mourning. The tone of the song, the tone of the score really matches the tone of the movie, and you can actually get those dark visuals in your head just listening to the music. It's just wonderful. So as you can probably tell, I really, really love this movie. It is a huge inspiration to me as far as how I imagine things whenever I try to think of something artistically. Now that I'm starting to make short films and actually help on productions, whenever I think of a dark character or situation, this movie is usually, if not the first, one of the first movies that I compare it to. It's bored a hole into my subconscious that I just love. I love the movie so much that I can't really watch the movie anymore as far as a movie experience, because I know it so well that it's like the back of my hand now. I know the mythology, I know the characters so well that it's almost like riding a bike. I just know it. But that doesn't mean I don't hate the movie, because when you've seen a movie so many times, you either have one of two reactions. You either can't stand it because you've seen it so many times, or you just love it and the surprises are gone, but you can appreciate the movie in an entirely new way now because you've seen it almost every way possible, and now you can look for the little things that nobody really looks for. And whether you want to call that whether you want to call it OCD or little nitpicking, I like to think of it more as a true film experience, because you're looking for the little things that how the director might have seen things or how the actors were trying to do. Because when you've seen a movie that many times, you can finally look for things like that. And anyway, it's a wonderful movie. I adore it. The two main things that I should talk about are what would happen if Brandon Lee had survived and he had lived to see the movie a success. I'm not sure if it would have been a success, to be honest. Like I said to open this review up, the tragic irony and the mysticism around the movie with Brandon Lee's death was a big factor in the movie's success and continues to be. I mean, I'm not saying the movie wouldn't have done well had he survived. I'm sure it would have, but it wouldn't have had the following. I sincerely believe it would not have had the following had Brandon Lee survived. It probably would have taken a lot longer for people to accept it as the great movie that it is had he survived. Because when you lose an artist, immediately you appreciate their work, no matter what type of artist they are. So immediately there was attraction to it because Brandon Lee had no longer been with us, and this was the last film, so everybody wanted to go see it. And the Lee family curse, that was another big superstition that people were entranced by. So I don't know. I'm pretty sure that if Brandon Lee had survived, they probably would have made a second movie, although I don't know if it would have been good, because this movie really stands on its own. It has a complete beginning and a complete middle and end. It doesn't really need to continue. And that's a big reason why I think all of the sequels and spin-offs haven't done well and they've failed, is because this is a complete story on its own. You don't need to keep going. There's no reason to continue the story past Eric Draven. That's the beginning, middle, and end. That's it. We don't need a City of Angels or a Salvation or even a TV series, although I do love the TV series. It's just not necessary. It turns the character into something that was completely unintended by both the creator, James O'Barr, from the comic book, which is a fantastic book, probably, like the film, one of the most underrated graphic novels ever. I'd put it up there with Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns, easily. This movie, like it, is one of the greatest comic book films of all time that sadly is being forgotten as time goes by, but I would easily put it in my top 5 comic book movies ever. Anyway, some people are wondering about this remake that they're talking about, with Stephen Norrington talking about it, and it could be interesting. I'm not opposed to a Crow remake, as long as it's different enough to not have any ties, either by the tone, the look, or anything else to the original story of Brandon Lee's Eric Draven. As long as it doesn't try to attempt to connect it any way to it, whether narrative-wise or artistically, anything like that, I think it's fair game. You can definitely try to remake it and do something new with it. But I think doing a completely different style of it is the safest way to try to have it stand on its own feet. Trying to make this a new Crow in a gothic, stylized, over-the-top version like the original Alex Proyas 1994 movie is not smart, because you'll immediately be compared to that movie, which is unparalleled, and you'll have hardcore, loyal fans of the film bashing the new movie, regardless of how good it is, because it's trying to do the same style as the original, and I don't think that's smart. But, from what I understand, the new movie is supposed to be even more gritty. If it's made in a gritty style, that keeps the tone of the characters and the story the same, but told in a different enough way, then I think you can do something new with it. I heard someone describe it as a quote-unquote documentary style. And that'd be fascinating, shooting a Crow movie in kind of a Blair Witch Project version. That's an interesting idea, and one I'm not opposed to. I think that'd be really, really interesting to see Eric Draven the Crow show up down a dark corner and shot with a shaky cam. I'm not saying the whole movie should be shot with a shaky cam, but that's an interesting idea, and one that would definitely be new and would be able to reach out to audiences today in ways that the old film just can't do anymore, unfortunately. So I'm all for a remake as long as it can work. I'm not sure how it's going to work, because this is a difficult movie to remake, but I think it can be done. So those are my thoughts. I hope you like them. I'm Silver Lightsaber, and I'll see you later.